48 fluorescent bulbs hummed over the dead salon, and the smell of bleach, dust, and old perm solution hung in the air when Tessa Rowan walked in wearing thrift store sneakers, a rain-dark cardigan, and exhaustion under both eyes, with 6-year-old Lily beside her, clutching a one-eared stuffed rabbit named Marble. $800, billionaire developer Olivia Vale said, glancing once at the cracked mirrors and then at Tessa's diaper bag and wrinkled sleeve. And the two brokers behind her laughed when Lily asked if this was going to be her mom's shop. Tessa only bent, tightened the loose strap on Lily's shoe, and brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead before taking the key without a word. 6 months later, the same woman who sold her the place as a joke would be standing in that building asking for terms. Listen closely, because the dead salon the city had already forgotten was the one thing Olivia Vale should never have let go. Before we dive further, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please share it with your beloved ones and subscribe to this channel. The building sat on the east edge of Calder Square, where old brick storefronts met new money. On one side stood a 9-story glass project marked for Vale Urban Holdings. On the other sat the Lark Building, a narrow 1928 commercial property with a corroded fire escape, 4 residential units upstairs, and 840 square feet of retail nobody had taken seriously in 13 years. The dead salon occupied 1,420 of those square feet. The hand-painted script on the front window still read Murel, though the last owner had filed bankruptcy 11 months earlier and left with the dryers, the books, and whatever pride she still had intact. That week mattered more than it looked. Vale Urban Holdings was preparing a refinancing presentation for a private capital group out of Chicago. 48 retail commitments had already been pre-sold across the development. The board wanted occupancy guarantees above 81%, and the city planning office wanted proof that small business displacement would be minimized. Olivia needed one symbolic local success story for her packet. She did not need a rotting salon with pipes that knocked in the walls and a roof, membrane past warranty by 9 years. Tessa did not need it either. If need was measured the way bankers measured things, she had $1, $140 in a checking account, $62 in cash, a 6-year-old daughter, a 2009 Honda Fit with a rear latch that only opened from inside, and a paper folder of licenses held together by a rubber band. She rented a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on Birch Street, where the radiators hissed too hard in winter and did almost nothing in spring. But need had another language, and Tessa understood that one better. People who saw her for the first time usually saw the wrong details first. They saw the tired cardigan, the frayed cuff, the grocery store tote with 2 combs sticking out, the way she moved like someone conserving strength, because there was not enough of it to waste. They missed her wrists, steady and fast. They missed the habit she had of looking at a room as if it were a machine that could be taken apart, understood, and reassembled with better tolerances. They missed the way she listened. That was common. At 34, Tessa had once been the lead corrective color specialist and floor systems consultant for Armand Voss Atelier, a salon group with 7 flagship locations in Manhattan, Boston, and Miami. The title sounded ornamental. It was not. She had built throughput maps for chair turnover, redesigned rinse stations to reduce shoulder strain by 14%, and created a low-ammonia rescue process that kept a celebrity divorce from becoming a tabloid scalp disaster. She could read porosity, water mineral content, scalp inflammation, and lighting temperature, and tell a stylist exactly why a result had failed. She could strip a chair pump, replace a hydraulic seal, and have the chair level again in 16 minutes. 3 years earlier, when Lily was still learning to say complete sentences, Tessa's husband, Nolan, had died on Interstate 87 when a delivery truck crossed a lane in freezing rain. He had been a maintenance electrician with a patient laugh and an appetite for repairing anything that buzzed, rattled, or leaked. Grief had not shattered Tessa so much as settled into her, layer by layer, until endurance became less a choice than a muscle memory. She had left New York because the rent climbed faster than breath. and a family contact in Calder offered a start. That contact moved to Phoenix 9 months later. Tessa stayed. At home, her life was small, exact, and almost silent. Lily slept on the inside half of the bed when storms came, her stuffed rabbit marble tucked beneath her chin. Tessa packed daycare snacks at 5:40 each morning and ironed her one good black apron on a towel spread over the kitchen counter, because she had not owned a proper ironing board in 2 years. On Tuesdays, she cut hair at a discount chain inside Crestview Plaza. On Fridays and Saturdays, she took private clients in their homes. Tessa never overbooked, she never ran late, she never advertised beyond a typed card and quiet work. Lily knew pieces of her mother's history the way children know constellations, by shape rather than by astrophysics. She knew her mother could fix sinks and braid with one hand. She knew that tired and weak were not the same word. One night, while Tessa sat at the kitchen table rebuilding a broken clipper motor with a jeweler's screwdriver and a flashlight clamped between 2 mugs, Lily set marble in her lap and said, "When things stop, you make them remember." Olivia Vale was 39, self-made in the way magazine profiles prefer. Daughter of a regional contractor, Wharton graduate, first acquisition at 26, first 100 million before 35. She wore restraint as if it had been custom-tailored. Cashmere in winter, ivory silk in spring. A watch so thin it seemed theoretical. She had a voice that never needed to rise because whole rooms were arranged in advance to meet it halfway. She was not stupid. That would have made the story simpler and less true. Olivia read balance sheets quickly, negotiated harder than most men twice her age, and understood municipal timelines down to the week. She had rescued failing properties before and turned them into clean, profitable statements of inevitability. She believed in systems, leverage, and speed. She also believed appearances were data, not perfect data, but usually enough. The Lark building irritated her because it resisted elegance. The numbers could not explain why it remained strangely alive. A locksmith still occupied Suite 204. A seamstress rented 206 and paid on the first of every month in money orders. An elderly pianist named Mrs. Lerner taught children in 209 using an upright so old its keys had yellowed toward tobacco. The dead salon below, however, was vacant blight. Legal had suggested mothballing it until condemnation became more practical. Olivia had a faster idea. The listing went live at 8:12 a.m. 2 days later as commercial unit. Cash only $800. No warranties, no contingencies. It drew exactly the kind of attention Cameron expected. Hobbyists, flippers, men who called women sweetheart on first meeting, and one exhausted single mother who emailed at 10:43 p.m. with 3 sentences, correct punctuation, and a request to see the plumbing stack before discussing anything else. Rain polished Calder Square into a dark, reflective grid that morning. Tessa arrived 11 minutes early with Lily, a folded umbrella, and a canvas tool roll inside her tote. She had paid for 2 hours of extra daycare once she knew the showing might matter. But the center called at 10:58 to say Lily had a fever reading of 99.8 and needed pickup. By 11:17, the child was back in Tessa's car with marble and a grape juice stain on her sleeve. There had been no time to change the plan. Inside, the Sassons smelled like old water trapped in walls. 3 stations remained bolted to the floor. One mirror had split diagonally. A reception counter leaned left by almost an inch. Tessa noticed the ceiling line first, then the floor sag near the rear shampoo area, then the fact that the breaker panel had been replaced sometime after 2016 because the labeling font was wrong for the original installation. She said none of this immediately. Lily stood near the front chair and whispered to Marble, "It's sad in here." Olivia entered at 11:34, still holding a leather portfolio from the meeting upstairs. Her heels clicked once on the tile and then paused. She took in Tessa in less than 4 seconds. Wet hem, drugstore ponytail, child, tote bag, no visible counsel, no contractor, no investor. Whatever possibility had existed in Cameron's scheduling trick ended there. "This unit is a liability transfer," Olivia said. "I assume that was clear in the listing." "It was," Tessa replied. Cameron handed over the boilerplate contract with a pen as if granting a favor. $800 gets you the keys, the remaining fixtures, and whatever problems come with them. We can close by 3 if you have the cash. Lily looked up at the broken mirrors. Mama, can you make this one pretty? One of the brokers laughed. Cameron did too. Olivia did not laugh. Exactly. She smiled with one corner of her mouth, which was worse. If your mother enjoys impossible projects, she said, she's found one. Tessa crouched, fixed the buckle on Lily's shoe, and stood again. Can I see the basement shutoff and the roof access log? She asked. Cameron blinked. Why? Because if the waistline is cast iron and the roof drain backs toward the east parapet, the front half of this unit isn't the expensive part. Cameron recovered first. There is no roof access log in the unit package. Then the roof has been neglected longer than your spreadsheet says. Olivia stepped in before his irritation became visible. You're buying a failed salon for $800, Miss Rowan. Miss Rowan, at this price, the roof should not concern you. Tessa glanced once toward the backwash stations. At any price, the roof concerns the person left standing under it. That should have landed. It did not. Certainty has poor hearing when it likes the sound of its own conclusions. Olivia signed the sale packet herself, mostly to end the morning. Tessa counted out the deposit from an envelope so worn it had gone soft at the folds. $200 in 20s. The remainder by cashier's check at close. Tessa closed the purchase at 2:46 p.m. The cashier's check left her with 136.12. She took the brass key, now tagged with a square of masking tape labeled front, and drove first to the daycare to settle Lily's missed fee balance before buying tomato soup and grilled cheese for dinner. At home, Lily drew the salon as she imagined it might become. She gave it pink curtains, impossible sunflowers, and a sign that read Marble and Mama in unsteady block letters. That night, after Lily slept, Tessa returned to the unit alone with a flashlight, a notebook, and Nolan's old moisture meter. Buildings talked if you let them. Not in metaphors, in numbers. The front sill plate showed 4% moisture on the east corner. Acceptable for old brick after rain if drainage improved. The rear wash zone subfloor dipped 73 inches over 6 feet, probably sistering failure rather than catastrophic joist loss. The breaker panel had 3 double-tapped circuits and 1 breaker feeding outlets that no longer existed. There was a hidden chase behind the color bar shelving. More interesting, there was a capped secondary water line running toward the north wall, where no fixture should have been. The next 6 weeks were measured in labor, not days. Tessa worked the plaza chain from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., picked up Lily, dropped her with Mrs. Lerner upstairs for 90 minutes, then stripped the dead salon until 10:30 most nights. She sold her wedding china for $340. She repaired and resold 2 old dryers from a cosmetology school liquidation for $620. She bartered color correction for a licensed plumber's inspection. She replaced water-damaged baseboard with primed pine cut in the alley behind the building under a clip light clipped to the Fitz hatch. People began to notice before they understood. Elijah Cross, the locksmith in Suite 204, first noticed the way she carried weight. He had spent 22 years opening safes, rehanging steel doors, and recognizing competence by the economy around it. On the 3rd evening, he leaned in her doorway with a cup of gas station coffee and watched Tessa remove a seized mixing valve cartridge without cracking the retaining collar. "You've done more than hair," he said. "A few things," she answered. Mrs. Lerner noticed other things. She noticed Lily sitting on the studio floor with marble and a packet of animal crackers while Tessa measured station spacing in exact 42-inch intervals. She noticed that Tessa never spoke sharply to the child, even when tiredness made her movements look brittle. She noticed the folded sketch taped inside the utility closet. 3 chairs instead of 6, wider aisles, 1 low-sensory room with dimmable lights, and a wash station angled for clients with limited neck mobility. "You're not building for speed," Mrs. Lerner said one evening. "No. For what, then?" Tessa checked a level bubble, then answered. "For people who hate needing help." The name went up in week 7, Rowan Quiet Studio, matte cream letters on smoked glass. No flourish, no neon, no desperate promise, no borrowed grandeur. Beneath it, Smaller text read cut, color, corrective care, private appointments available. Her first official client was a trauma nurse named Sophia who had lost a fist-sized patch of hair after a reaction to medication. Tessa booked 90 minutes and used only 53. She adjusted the chair height twice, so Sophia would not have to apologize for slouching. She cut the silhouette dry, rebalanced weight lines around the loss area, and blended with a directional texture technique that made the gap disappear unless you knew exactly where to look. When Sophia cried, Tessa placed tissues within reach and turned away just enough to return privacy. 3 nurses came the next week, then a school principal, then the teenage son of a city councilman who refused every loud salon in town because the dryers triggered his sensory overload. Tessa had already rewired one room with insulated paneling and a lower decibel hood dryer sourced from an estate sale in Albany. She had anticipated him before anyone named him. Lily claimed the back corner near the laundry sink as her kingdom. She did homework there on a folding stool and kept marble seated in a tiny child's chair Tessa found on the curb and repainted cream. Sometimes she drew customers as queens, firefighters, and astronauts after their appointments, as if hair were merely the visible part of a more secret restoration. Once she held up a picture of her mother standing in front of the salon with a toolbox in one hand and scissors in the other. By month 3, the numbers were no longer fragile. Gross weekly receipts averaged 4,860. Rebook rate sat at 63% without any discounts. Tessa kept the overhead tight. She refinished instead of replacing. She negotiated linen service down by agreeing to Tuesday-only pickup. She bought salon-grade back bar in concentrated gallons and tracked color formula deviations in a composition notebook with dates, humidity notes, and water hardness readings. Her technical mind never announced itself. It simply made fewer mistakes than everyone around it. Cameron Pike arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in a charcoal suit meant for rooms with quieter. Floor's Rowan Quiet Studio smelled faintly of bergamot, steam, and clean towels. Every chair was occupied. Tessa was at Station 2, correcting a brass-heavy bleach band with a violet-blue gloss mix at a ratio that would have bored him if he understood it. He waited near the door, annoyed at having to wait at all. Cameron glanced around as if the success of the room were somehow aggressive. "Miss, Vale sent me to discuss a small procedural issue. The delivery lane behind the Lark building falls under our operational easement. Your suppliers have been using it outside temporary allowance. Also, there's concern about increased water draw from an aging line tied into a redevelopment zone." Tessa said, "My deliveries are Tuesday at 7:10 and Thursday at 7:05, both under 12 minutes. The meter split was approved by city utilities on May 14. So do informal threats," Tessa said. It was the longest sentence Elijah had heard from her. Cameron's smile thinned. He left a printed notice on the counter anyway, 7 days to cure access irregularities, enough pressure to scare a weaker operator into leaving voluntarily. That was the theory. That evening, Lily found Tessa studying the notice under the back task light after closing. "Bad paper?" Lily asked. "Maybe." Lily considered this and set marble on the counter next to the letter, as if the rabbit might assist. "You don't have a scared face," she said. "What face do I have?" "The fixing one." Children said these things and then returned to coloring. Adults needed meetings. Tessa did not call a lawyer first. She went to city utilities at 8:03 the next morning, requested archived line maps, and paid $18 for copies. She visited the permit office after lunch and pulled microfilm scans from a 1997 renovation. By 4:40 she knew 2 things. First, the salon's supposedly temporary water tie was permanent, filed correctly, and older than Vale Urban Holdings' ownership claim by 19 years. Second, the capped line in the north wall was not abandoned. It connected to a former upstairs laundry riser that ran through a utility chase shared by all 4 residential units. If Cameron obstructed access and a freeze event hit in winter, the upper tenants could lose water entirely. She drafted a 2-page response with attachments, citing permit numbers, easement language, and utility authority. Her sentences were spare. Her evidence was not. Elijah delivered it by hand to Vale Urban Holdings at 9:12 a.m. because, in his words, some papers deserve a witness. Olivia read it between two lender calls. By the second paragraph, she stopped skimming. By the appendix, she set the pages down and asked Cameron, very quietly, "Did you verify any of this before sending notice?" Still, she dismissed the larger implication. One sharp operator in a small room was still only one sharp operator in a small room. Olivia had a $94 million refinancing to close and a board that watched softness the way hawks watched open fields. She instructed legal to withdraw the notice without admission and told Cameron to leave the salon alone unless real exposure emerged. The seamstress in Suite 206 slipped. On the rear stair, a contractor employed by Vale Urban left adhesive dust along the tread nosings. She was not gravely injured, but she tore a ligament in her wrist and could not sew for 3 weeks. Tessa found her sitting on the landing while Lily stood below holding marble and not speaking. Tessa called the ambulance, photographed the stair residue, taped off the landing, and then spent 40 minutes locating the contractor's site manifest from a stack of open boxes in the alley because the foreman had already started pretending he was not responsible. The incident should have stayed small. Cameron made sure it did not. He pushed the contractor to deny fault and quietly floated a rumor that the old building's tenants were becoming operational nuisances, delaying redevelopment. The phrase reached Olivia at a dinner with investors and irritated her because it was sloppy, yet she did nothing. Pressure, in her experience, clarified outcomes. At home that Friday, Lily sat cross-legged on the apartment floor while Tessa mended the hem of her school uniform with black thread doubled for strength. "Are rich people busy because they're important?" Lily asked. "Or mean because they're scared?" "Sometimes neither," she said. "Sometimes they just get used to not being corrected." Lily digested this with grave seriousness. "That sounds lonely." The next morning brought a different kind of proof. A woman named Dana Mercer arrived before opening with a garment bag and a photograph from 2008. In the photograph, she was 23, smiling uncertainly under stage lights, her hair a dark lacquered wave that made her look, even in stillness, as if she trusted the future. Now she was 41 and recovering from chemotherapy. Thin regrowth feathered across her scalp in uncertain directions. Tessa took the photograph, studied the old-cut geometry, and asked 3 questions about texture, medication, and heat sensitivity. Then she spent 2 hours shaping what remained into something intentional rather than apologetic. She adjusted density by cross-checking perimeter softness against crown lift. She used no pity, only craft. "No," Lily said from the coloring corner, where Marble had been appointed assistant manager. "You look like you found yourself again." Success would have pleased almost anyone. It unsettled Olivia. The city planning office, preparing public comments on Calder Crown, cited Rowan Quiet Studio as evidence that independent operators were stabilizing foot traffic on the block without subsidy. A council member asked whether Vale Urban intended to preserve more legacy retail during redevelopment. The question was mild. The implication was not. One impossible salon had become a story people preferred to Olivia's narrative of inevitability. She visited in person the following Thursday at 6:18 p.m. after the last client and before dusk fully left the street. Rowan Quiet Studio was quiet in the way well-designed rooms are quiet. The mirrors were no longer cracked. The front desk stood level. Shelving built from reclaimed maple ran along the wall where the old product tower had sagged. A child's drawing in a thin frame hung near the back. A woman with scissors, a toolbox, and a rabbit watching from a chair. Tessa was kneeling beside an open base cabinet, tightening a water hammer arrestor. Lily sat nearby reading to Marble in a whisper. Olivia waited to be acknowledged. Tessa finished the turn, wiped her hand, and stood. "This is an improvement," Olivia said. Olivia looked around again, searching for the seam she had missed. "You've created momentum that may present opportunities." "We're revising our block strategy," Olivia continued. "There could be grant participation, co-branding, possibly a tenant-featured small business corridor, provided all parties operate collaboratively. Collaboratively, Tessa repeated. I'm willing, Olivia said, to discuss support. For what? For alignment. Tessa set the wrench on the counter. If you mean permission to use my business as proof your project helps people, the answer is no. You're making a strategic error, Olivia said. Maybe, Tessa answered, but not the same one twice. Olivia left with the strange sensation of having been handled gently and refused completely. On the sidewalk, she called Cameron and asked for everything on Tessa Rowan, not gossip. Everything. Voss Technical Interior Systems. Modular Wet Zone Efficiency Array. Contributor on attached engineering supplement. Tessa Rowan. The first showed a station layout now used, with variations, in more than 200 high-end salons nationwide. The second contained Tessa's annotated recommendations on hydraulic chair spacing, anti-fatigue flooring compounds, client privacy sightlines, and low-decibel wash basin mounting. The diagrams were neat, severe, deeply practical. Another archived interview in Salon Ledger called her the corrective specialist behind the Voss resilience model, crediting her with redesigning operations after Hurricane Sandy disrupted 3 locations. She had built contingency systems for inventory, emergency water access, and mobile client triage. She had not merely worked in salons. She had designed the way successful ones survived stress. That alone would have been embarrassing. The worst revelation came with the appendix to the patent supplement. Tessa's consulting entity, Rowan Adaptive Interiors, still held a minority licensing interest in several ergonomic basin mounts, later incorporated into salon packages, manufactured by Aureline Fixtures, a supplier now contracted for portions of Calder Crown's luxury wellness floor. Vale Urban had indirectly benefited from a design logic Tessa helped create. They were showcasing premium environments built on principles she had once drawn by hand. Concern became urgency 3 days later, when a storm front sat over Calder for 18 hours, and rain found the weaknesses in every lazy decision Cameron had made. Water backed toward the east parapet of the Lark building exactly as Tessa had warned. The neglected roof drain overwhelmed. The utility chase took on seepage, and by 2:07 a.m., a leak began migrating through the mechanical interface, connecting the old building's service wall to temporary electrical feeds installed for Calder Crown's annex staging area. By 6:32 a.m., 2 retail pre-lease suites in the adjacent development had moisture alarms in their subpanels. By 7:10, a transformer protection relay tripped, shutting down refrigeration in a gourmet market not yet open but fully stocked for an investor preview. Potential loss, $178. Zero zone in inventory and a cascade of contractual penalties if the preview failed. The site engineer recommended isolating the feed and waiting for an emergency contractor with drying equipment. Estimated restoration to safe power, 9 to 12 hours. Olivia arrived in a raincoat over silk and found panic arranged in expensive layers. Contractors blamed legacy infrastructure. Cameron blamed the city. The site engineer blamed inaccessible chase geometry and outdated riser maps. None of them knew how the Lark building's old service spine actually ran. None of them had bothered to learn. At 7:18, Elijah called. They're flooding themselves with ignorance, he said. And they finally noticed the building remembers you were right. Tessa had Lily at the salon eating cereal from a paper cup because school was delayed for weather. She looked at the ceiling where the old line passed overhead and listened to the rain on glass. Then she packed 2 adjustable wrenches, Nolan's voltage pen, her line maps, and Lily's yellow raincoat. At the Calder Crown Annex, security tried to stop her at the cordon. Olivia saw her through the plastic strip curtains and told them to move. The scene was loud with generators, wet boots, and men talking faster than they were thinking. Tessa took in the soaked chase wall, the temporary feed routing, the alarm lights, and the puddling pattern on the sealed concrete. She knew the answer before anyone finished explaining. The leak isn't the main problem, she said. Your temporary feed conduit crosses too close to the old riser elbow. Water tracked down the bracket fasteners, not the pipe seam. Kill panel B7, isolate the annex transfer loop, and open the north inspection hatch in the salon wall. There's an access cavity behind my color shelving. Olivia asked the only useful question left. "Can you stop this?" What followed was not dramatic in the theatrical sense. It was technical, exact. Tessa directed 2 electricians to isolate the feed in a sequence that prevented back surge into the chilled display line. She opened the salon's north wall access panel, crawled into a service void barely 28 inches wide, and located the compromised bracket path by touch and flashlight. She had done worse in Manhattan basements after flood events. She rerouted water with a temporary vinyl sleeve, had Elijah brace the old riser clamp with threaded rod from his shop, and instructed the engineer to shift load staging in 17-minute intervals while fans dried the interface zone. At 9:03 a.m., Tessa emerged dusty, wet to one shoulder, and asked for the annex panel restart. The engineer hesitated. She repeated the command with 3 more words, now in sequence. They complied. Panel B7 stabilized. Refrigeration resumed. The Gourmet Market's compressors kicked back with a groan and then settled. Moisture readings began to fall. The investor preview, delayed but not canceled, remained salvageable. The public part came later that afternoon in the unfinished atrium where Olivia had been scheduled to greet lenders. Word had already spread among contractors and tenants that the woman from the little salon had kept the block from eating itself. Elijah stood at the back beside Mrs. Lerner, who had come in spite of the rain. Lily stood near a column in dry clothes someone had found for her, holding marble and watching her mother with the solemn faith children reserve for truths already proven. Olivia changed the program. She walked to the temporary podium, looked once at the prepared remarks in front of her, then set them aside. "There was an operational failure on this block this morning," she said. "It was caused in part by assumptions my company made about an older building and the people in it. Those assumptions were wrong." She turned toward Tessa, who stood off to the side in borrowed coveralls and work boots still dark from rain. "Miss Rowan identified the structural risk months ago. She documented it. She was ignored. Today she prevented a shutdown that would have cost this project 6 figures and substantial reputational damage. More importantly, she did work my team should have understood before needing her to do it for us." Olivia continued, each word more expensive than the last because she meant them. "I sold her that salon dismissively. I treated her competence as invisible because it arrived dressed in fatigue and carrying a child. That was my failure, not hers." She took a folder from the podium and handed it to Tessa in full view of the room. Inside was a signed purchase and sale offer for the entire Lark building at a price far below current market, but well above anything Tessa could have imagined 6 months earlier. Seller financed over 20 years, fixed at 2.1%, with immediate title transfer upon execution, and a carve-out requiring preservation leases for the existing upstairs tenants. Olivia spoke quietly now. "My company has legal exposure tied to this morning and reputational exposure tied to how this block has been managed. I can spend the next year fighting that truth, or I can respect it. You created value where I saw waste. You protected people I treated as temporary. If you're willing, I want the building in the hands of the person who already acts like it belongs to her." Tessa opened the folder. The terms were real. The numbers were realer. Monthly payment, less than market rent for her salon plus apartment combined. There was even a clause requiring Vale Urban to fund full roof remediation within 30 days as part of settlement on shared infrastructure. Negligence. When she finally asked why, Olivia answered without ornament, "'Cause I was wrong, because you were not, because this is the cleanest way to repair one part of that." Tessa looked down again at the contract, then at Mrs. Lerner, who had one hand pressed against her own throat, then at Elijah, then finally at Lily. Lily hugged Marble and said, in the clear voice children use when they have no instinct for strategic timing, "Mama keeps houses from being lonely too." Tessa closed the folder. "The upstairs tenants keep their rents for 3 years, she said. "No forced increases. Ground floor stays independent. No chain option clause. And the rear stairs get rebuilt to code, not patched." The closing happened 19 days later in a conference room with bad coffee and overactive air conditioning. Tessa wore a navy dress bought secondhand and hemmed by the seamstress. From 206 in repayment, she insisted on calling friendship instead of debt. Olivia wore cream. Elijah came as witness. Mrs. Lerner brought peppermints in her handbag and cried only once discreetly when title transferred. Lily signed nothing, of course, but she drew a picture on the legal pad of a brick building with 4 windows and a rabbit in every one. Owning the building did not make life suddenly easy. The boiler in the basement failed 32 days later. One upstairs unit needed bathroom subfloor replacement. Property taxes were a language of their own. Tessa learned it. She refinanced nothing. She wasted nothing. She converted the vacant rear storage room into a 2-chair training studio for stylists who needed a second start after illness, divorce, or career gaps. She created lease renewals that favored steadiness over extraction misses. Lerner's rent remained low enough for music lessons to continue. Elijah signed a 5-year lease with an option to purchase his suite if he ever wanted it. The seamstress in 206 expanded into alterations for 3 bridal boutiques. 2 months after closing, Olivia visited again, this time alone and without an agenda thick enough to hide inside. Rowan Quiet Studio had added 1 more chair and a shelf of fragrance-free products for clients in treatment. It was late. The street had gone blue with evening. Lily was on the floor doing homework with marble propped against a pencil cup like a supervisor. "I wanted," she said, then stopped and began again more honestly. "I wasn't sure if the first apology covered the full size of it." "No apology covers everything," she said. "It just starts where the lying stops." Tessa gave a small nod. "You asked the right questions eventually. That counts." "It's not sad now," Lily said. "Mama says buildings can breathe if people are kind inside them." Olivia looked around the room one more time. The maple shelves, the low lights, the framed drawings, the repaired old bones holding new life without complaint. She had spent years believing value announced itself in polish, scale, and velocity. But some forms of value arrived looking like fatigue and stayed long enough to fix what other people had monetized as ruin. Winter came clean and bright that year. By December, the Lark Building windows held small white lights on warm timers. Rowan Quiet Studio closed 3 days before Christmas so Tessa could repaint Lily's bedroom door the pale green the child had chosen after, deliberating between 9 paint chips as seriously as zoning law. On Christmas Eve, snow collected in the fire escape corners and along the sidewalk seams of Calder Square. Upstairs, Mrs. Lerner played carols soft enough to be mistaken for memory. Tessa stayed late in the salon after the final appointment, sweeping cut hair into neat silver drifts before locking each station. The building was hers now, in the legal sense, and in the deeper one earned by care repeated until structure answered back. She checked the boiler pressure, set the night thermostat, and turned off the last light in the sensory room. Lily waited near the door in a red coat too puffy for elegance and exactly right for winter marble tucked under one arm. "Are we going home, boss?" she asked. She handed Lily a tiny brass key on a blue ribbon. "The front door," Tessa said. "Yours when you're with me. One rule. Always lock up carefully," Tessa said. "We take care of what takes care of us." Lily nodded with the seriousness of ceremony. She reached up, turned the deadbolt with both hands, and listened for the click. Outside, snow moved through the streetlight in quiet diagonal lines. Elijah was across the way closing his shop. Mrs. Lerner's music slipped faintly through old walls. Somewhere in an upper apartment, a kettle began to sing. Lily slid her mittened hand into Tessa's and looked back at the lit windows of the building they had been laughed out of, before anyone imagined they might belong there. When Lily asked if they had won, Tessa considered the snow, the warm key in Lily's hand, the rooms above them full of ordinary lives still intact. For a 6-year-old, that was apparently the better answer. Lily nodded once, satisfied, and leaned against her mother's coat as they started down the sidewalk together, marble swinging gently between them, while behind them the old building stood warm and lit and unmistakably home. And Tessa's mouth moved into something small, quiet, and unmistakably a smile, as if some places did not need to be conquered after all, only recognized and kept.